Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my thoughts on the Dorm Daze Trilogy, a series of comedies directed by Scott and David Hillenbrand. And before I go any further sharing my thoughts on these films, I want to give a special shout out to Brock for requesting these reviews. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. Link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, the Dorm Days films are, in my opinion, not necessarily 0% on Rotten Tomatoes bad, like they are currently on Rotten Tomatoes, but they definitely aren't what I would consider to be classics. And the best one is at best just kind of a time waster for me. Now, the first film is directed by Scott Hillenbrand, and prior to this, along with his brother, they did films like Survival Island and King Cobra. Now, I'm familiar with King Cobra, which apparently was their theatrical, well, not really their theatrical debut, it was their film debut because they hadn't directed a feature film until King Cobra. I'm familiar with that one because I watched that a few times growing up on VHS. But I never even heard of this movie until it was requested for me to check out. Like, I'd seen this on the shelves at a thrift store, but the DVD cover art and the plot never really interested me, so I always passed on it. Like, this is one of those titles, as well as the other Dorm Days films, that I've seen in thrift stores and resale stores all the time throughout the years. Uh, and that's probably kind of telling because they're like, yeah, we don't really like these enough to own them or to keep them in our collection. Now, so yeah, it's directed by Scott Hillenbrand. It's written by Patrick Casey and Worm Miller. Uh, you also have a pretty decent cast full of some fairly well-known names, like Patrick Renna from The Big Green and The Sandlot, Tatiana Ali, who was in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the sitcom with Will Smith. You have like James DeBello, who's been in stuff like Cabin Fever. Uh, you have Danielle Fishel, Topanga herself from Boy Meets World. Courtney Gaines from Children of the Corn. Chris Owen from American Pie, who played the Shermanator. So there's some fairly well-known names in this that you might recognize. The movie is advertised as a raunchy sex comedy. And in some ways that is true because there are references to things like, do you want to eat my sausage and so on and so forth. There's some fantasy sequences that showcase some nudity, and there's a whole plot involving this one younger brother who is goaded by his older brother to have sex with the prostitute so he can no longer be a virgin. So there's definitely elements of raunchy sex comedy in the script for Dorm Days by Patrick Casey and Worm Miller, but it's not really an American Pie knockoff, despite the fact that it was marketed as such. It's really more of a old-fashioned comedy about just a multitude of misunderstandings. That's really what Dorm Days is. The direction is okay for this kind of movie. It definitely doesn't look like anything that special visually. There were a lot of moments where it's very static, very stock, very stiff, not a lot of movement with the camera. Uh, there really isn't a lot going on in terms of trying to showcase any kind of skill visual wise other than the bare minimum. Set the camera up, set up some average framing for each shot, and just call it a day. Like, nothing about the direction in this is anything any different than any other direct to video National Lampoon's movie or American Pie sequel. So it's not really a film that's that impressive or that technically skilled when it comes to the direction by Scott. It's just kind of just there. So is a lot of other technical aspects of the movie, like the cinematography and the editing. Really, what makes this film, in my opinion, sort of fun to watch is its script. I think the screenwriters did a great job in terms of building all of these misunderstandings up. All these different things that happen throughout the plot where certain characters think one thing about some other character or the relationship with someone else, but then there's actually something else happening entirely and it's not what it seems. And how there's this whole thing involving this purse full of money, and it was sent to the wrong person at this college, but then the girl that got it, she decides to just start this whole um, facade where she acts like she's the one that was sent the money, so she's trying to pull one over on the bad guy and his team, and all the while there's all this other drama going on. There's a nerdy guy who has a crush on this girl, and they actually hooked up the night before, but she doesn't want anything to do with him because she's in love with another guy. Um, and she doesn't know that that one guy is gay. So there's a lot of stuff going on with the script where there's a bunch of people who are trying to spread rumors, and are these two gals are just absolutely awful, just terrible characters. They're just trying to spread rumors and chaos, and then you find out that they're actually criminals by the end. That they're trying to be these bastions of integrity, and they had cocaine in their dorm. Um, and it is one of those scripts that eventually, by the end of it, everyone there's a resolution to everything. There's even a resolution to the mix up involving this one hooker named Dominique and this other exchange student named Dominique who's mistaken for being a hooker. And there's also resolution for the purse that is exactly the same as the other purse that had the money in it, but the one purse was one that someone's friend got from their grandmother, and so the friend of hers is trying to hide from her friend throughout the majority of the film because she doesn't want her to know that she borrowed her handbag, and eventually that resolves itself. The one girl who had the bag from her grandmother. She's dating this other guy. He accidentally hits her in the face with the door when he's just, opening the door, trying to, after she tells him to come in. And the two rumor mongers, they assume that her black eyes from him beating her. They even overhear what they think is evidence of him beating her and being aggressive, but it's just him and this other girl doing a play, rehearsing a play together. And so there's a lot of stuff that I guess you can maybe consider to be relatively tame and kind of cliched when it comes to this script. But it's just the way that things escalate that I felt was really well handled and well done, and it consistently kept my, interest. I was consistently intrigued and compelled to see what kind of misunderstanding was gonna blow up next and how everything was going to resolve itself in the end. So, for that, I definitely think Dorm Days is in all honesty, a relative success because its whole point is not necessarily to be a raunchy teen sex comedy. Its whole point is to be more of a throwback comedy from yesteryear that's focusing on all of these different sort of misunderstandings, but with a flavor and a feel of a teenage sex comedy in the vein of American Pie. But it's not as sex obsessed as that film or its sequel, and it's definitely not as gross. There's not a ton of gross out comedy. There's not really a lot of that going on. So there's not an abundance of that, which I do appreciate because I think that gets old real fast. And to be honest, I think the cast is actually pretty good. I think all of them have some good chemistry. They work together well, play their roles well. Cameron Richardson, who plays Adrienne, Tony Denman, who plays Newmar. I liked him in particular. He has some pretty underrated physical comedy ability that's definitely on display in this. Bodie Bliss is Dominique the hooker. Edwin Hodge is Tony. Patrick Renna from The Sandlot is Styles. James DeBello as Cliff, Tatiana Ali as Claire, Maria Defino as Jerry Farber, Daniel Fishel as Marla, Jennifer Lyons as Lynn, Courtney Gaines as Lorenzo, Randy Spelling as Foosball, Marie Noel Marquis as Dominique, the student, Chris Owen as Booker McPhee, Paul Hansen Kim as Wang, Patrick Kavanaugh as Pete, Worm Miller, who plays Brady, the RA, Patrick Casey. So, yeah, all of them, I think, for the most part, they do a good job performance wise when it comes to the kind of film that they're making. And like I said, the technical aspects of it aren't really anything that amazing, but they're fine. The music was pretty awful, though. The music was ass. This music was really bad. It took me out of some scenes because the score was just so shitty. But I had some fun with it. It was like 96 minutes. It didn't feel like it was that boring. And like I said, I was continually, for the most part, intrigued by the misunderstandings that go on throughout the plot. And I thought there were a couple chuckle worthy moments in terms of the comedy. There were some moments where you get some pretty face palm inducing cliches, like an actual cat fight, complete with cat sound effects and other things that just kind of go on a bit too long or make you roll your eyes. But there wasn't a ton of that though in this script. So I think for the most part the script was decent, the direction was decent, and the cast did a pretty good job for what they were asked to do. So I could see why this has a bit of a cult following from some people. Like I could see why some people liked it enough that they wanted to see more, and that's why we got Dorm Daze too, because I think the rentals and the sales were good enough for the first movie that they decided to put some money and some advertising and investments into Dorm Daze 2, which was released direct to video in 2006, 3 years after the first movie. This one is also directed by Scott Hillenbrand and written by Patrick Casey and Worm Miller, and it returns a good chunk of the cast from the first film, but there's a lot of people that are not there that didn't reprise their roles, like Edwin Hodge as Tony. Um, you don't have Claire, Tatiana Ali's character; she's not back. You don't get Cameron Richardson. I think that's who that is. I don't believe that her character comes back either, because I think she's the one that fell in love with Newmar. She might be. No, she's not in there at all. In fact, she's not even mentioned. Like, you don't even know what happened, like, what to her character. She's no longer in the cast. Um, the direction by Hillenbrand, it's pretty much the same when it comes to what he did in the previous movie. It's nothing special. It's serviceable. It's decent enough for a low budget comedy, but it's definitely not that inventive or creative when it comes to the visuals. It's definitely very bland when it comes to the shot structure. The script by Patrick Casey and Worm Miller. This time they have some members of the Dorm Daze cast. They are now going to a semester at sea on a cruise ship. And they're doing that because they were invited to be a part of this competition for drama students. So now a good chunk of this cast from the first film are now all of a sudden drama students. That was never really established in the first movie, but okay, they're now drama students and they're going to put on a play on this cruise ship. And there's this newcomer to the cast named Rusty, who is, for the most part, pretty much the main character. Like Newmar, you would think after the end of Dorm Daze that he would be the star. And if you look at the cover, he is on the cover, but he's not the star of this movie. He's barely even in the film. And instead is Rusty, played by Orange Skoog. And the Rusty character, he's not endearingly oblivious and nerdy like Newmar. Like Newmar, like he seemed like a nice guy the way he was written and the way that he was portrayed by the actor Tony Denman. Like you kind of felt for the guy and you rooted for him. You wanted him to get the girl. You wanted him to, have somebody share his sausage, so to speak. But you didn't really feel that way about Rusty. He was just an obnoxious jerk for the most part, and he's focused on for a large chunk of the movie. Um, and this whole plot about him getting laid because he's a virgin. And there's this mystery plot involving this diamond, and it was stolen. And there's this guy who's a professor at the college named Rex Cavendish, who obviously stole the diamond. It's so obvious it hurts. You also have like another like character who's pretty obviously a bad guy, and the dean and Dean Dreyer. And you have this captain of the boat who is revealed to be a villain as well, and Captain Bunkley, which is also very predictable. So a lot of the stuff involving the mystery angle is pretty much a fail because it's very predictable and just chock full of cliches. It's not like it's a satire of those elements either. It's just, let's throw a bunch of cliches in here. And the misunderstanding stuff is not really the focus of the script. Like, it's a lot of just American Pie, typical teen sex comedy shenanigans. You even have now Wang and this other guy who is he was like the guy who was doing student tours, who was friends with Cliff. Like all of a sudden, this guy now has more screen time, Peter, and he's a stoner just because. So you have a lot of typical stoner comedy now and teen, or raunchy sex comedy elements. And you got this whole stuff with Booker and his girlfriend who he breaks up with, and then he feels bad because he wants to I think her name is Rachel, and it's the same actress from the first movie, by the way. And he breaks up with her. She's sleeping with other guys. He's going around dancing and kissing other girls, but eventually they can't stop thinking about each other. And through something that happens in the final play, they wind up getting back together again, rather predictably. You have this whole thing involving Marla and Lynn, where for some reason they become abstinent, and they also are hinted at maybe being into one another, and maybe being lesbians, but it's never really fully clarified by the end of the movie. You have this whole thing with this captain and his hot wife who turns out to be a porn star, and Rusty uses that as blackmail to try to get her to bang him, and all these different shenanigans ensue where he has to hide from the captain along with all these other guys who have been banging the captain's wife. And there's this whole thing where she promises to bang him if he shows up at her room at a certain time, but that's at the same time as they're doing the play, so he's got to do his part in the play and then run back to the room to have sex. But then of course the captain's there, and then he has to hide, and then all this other stuff going on. Of course, you had the stuff going on with the diamond and this murder on the boat because Cavendish was found dead. And you're just like, I get what the writers are trying to do here, but it's just not nearly as fun or as refreshing as the old fashioned series of misunderstandings just escalating throughout the plot, like in the first Dorm Days. And that's why the best aspects of this sequel are when they go back to what worked in the first film, the whole play at the end, which has all these different acts and all these different elements in it that are spontaneous and are all set up by all these series of misunderstandings and different sort of things that happen last minute, or things that break down and they have to try to fix it on the spot. And that's the best part of the movie, is that part of the film, because it's actually fun and the cast gets to interact with each other a lot more and show their chemistry. And it's a lot better than stuff involving a stupid monkey that's like stealing things, because the two stoner guys got this monkey from some guy in town, like at a place that they stopped at while they were on the cruise. And the guy sold him this monkey because they were trying to buy a monkey bone, because apparently monkey bones is something that people smoke, as a first for me. And so they're trying to get this monkey bones, and they just get a monkey who just steals things. There's the character of Foosball, who's played by a different actor, and Justin Whalen, who is now overly flamboyantly gay, which is the complete opposite of the way that Foosball was portrayed in the first movie. It's like a completely different character. There's even a point where he gets high on drugs and starts dressing like in drag. Um, and yeah, there's just a lot of stuff that's just very typical, very just been there, done that when it comes to the plot elements. The best things are the aspects of it that just deal with the play. That's what it should have been. That should have been the main focus of it, is them trying to put on this play and the struggle of trying to get everything pinned down correctly and working together and getting their lines correct. And that's what the whole focus of the movie should have been, with maybe a bit of sex shenanigans thrown in. But too much of the script is mostly sex and stoner shenanigans, and not enough of the clever writing that made the first film actually kind of decent. The cast, I mean, they're doing the best they can. Orange Skoog though is he's so bad. Like this guy, he's got a lot of energy, but he has no personality. He has no real charm or charisma. So he just comes across as just annoying most of the time. Uh and try hard. Like the times where he's trying to be funny, he's just overdoing it. But, people like James DeBello in his bit role as like the pirate bartender are okay. Charles Shaughnessy in his bit role as Rex, or Larry Drake, Dr. Giggles himself as the dean. Tony Denman is pretty good in the few scenes that he has in the movie. Chris Owens okay as Booker again. I like Daniel Fishel and Jennifer Lyons as Marla and Lynn. Once again, they still have good chemistry. They play off each other really well in this. I loved Maria Delfino as Jerry, especially when she just starts getting progressively more and more alcoholic as the film goes on, to the point where she's just like, fuck it, I'm just going to be wasted throughout the entire play. Um, Patrick Kavanaugh and Wang, Paul Hansen Kim, like both of them, they were kind of fun too as the two stoner guys. Richard Riley as the captain. I didn't mind his performance in this. Um, but there's some other newcomers, like the guy who plays Dante, Nicholas Shake, who's like one of the members of the play, who really is the guy who killed the Cavendish and is crazy. Like that performance is weak. Uh, Justin Whalen as Foosball was pretty cringe, like really bad by Justin Whalen. Like, and I like Justin Whalen as an actor. I mean, he was great in Child's Play 3 and he's good in some other stuff, but man, this performance is pretty brutal, pretty bad to watch. Just fell right into every stereotypical portrayal of a gay person imaginable to the point where it felt like it was honestly kind of insulting. Um, the other actors like Jeremy Howard as Eli, Vita Guerrera as Violet, who's the new girlfriend of Tony Denman's character Newman. She was hot, but she couldn't act. Kip Martin as Stukas, that guy was a total lunkhead, pretty flat actor. Gable Carr, I liked as Rachel as well. I liked her bit part in it. Um, so the cast is not like the worst ever. Like it could be a hell of a lot more problematic or a hell of a lot more poorly done and executed in terms of the performances. So you know, for this kind of movie, there's some fun performers who are doing the best that they can, but they have a much weaker script this time around than what they were working with in the first Dorm Daze. But I could have some dumb fun with it at times. I will admit, because of the play aspects and some of the mystery stuff was kind of fun as well, even though it was incredibly predictable. The technical elements of the movie, nothing special, nothing really that stupendous. The cinematography by Robert Kochek and Philip D. Schwartz, or the editing by Dave O'Brien. The music by David Hillenbrand was once again pretty bad, pretty poor, pretty lackluster in terms of the music. But I mean, there are worse ways to spend your time than with Dorm Daze too, but there's also a lot better comedies out there and a lot better, frat or teen or raunchy sex comedies out there as well. Now, the third Dorm Daze movie is called Transylmania. Now, this one initially was being developed as Dorm Daze 3, but I think maybe Dorm Daze 2 didn't do as well in terms of rentals and sales, so they decided, let's just not call it Dorm Daze anymore. Let's call it something else, but we'll have some returning cast members and characters from the first two movies, and we'll call it Transylmania. And this one is wildly different when it comes to its approach. This is no longer a raunchy frat comedy franchise at this point. It's now going into the realm of horror parody, something like Stan Helsing. Like this honestly has more in common with something like Stan Helsing than it does with Dorm Daze. This one's directed by David and Scott Hillenbrand. And I believe they had a little bit more of a budget to work with this one, and that does show. Uh, I would say direction wise, this is the best one out of all of the three. There's some more ambitious framing, and there's some more intriguing shot selection in this or usage of the camera. At times, there's still some moments where the direction is a bit rough. Like let's use a Dutch angle for literally no reason. But there's still some nice energy to some of the shots and the bigger budget to work with, the different setting of it being in Transylvania and it being a horror film, horror comedy definitely does help when it comes to the direction and gives it a different look and overall feel to it. The script is also by Patrick Casey and Worm Miller. And by the way, Patrick Casey and Worm Miller, they would go on to be involved with the Sonic films after this, as well as one of the film's stars who helped write the screenplay. Um, and Worm Miller, who plays Brady. Now, this is just one of those films that is just pretty lame. Honestly, I feel the same way about it as I do the second movie. There are some moments where I can have some dumb fun with it, but for the most part, it's pretty lame and unfunny, and just more dull and forgettable than anything else. So the script this time around, okay, you get some of the Dorm Daze cast, and Pete and Newmar and Wang and Lynn and Rusty and some complete total newcomers who weren't in the previous two films. Cliff is also in this for a little bit as well. And they wind up going to Transylvania. There's a college and a castle over there that they're going to attend. And the reason why they're going there really is because Rusty, he's been involved with romantically with this girl who's from Romania or Transylvania. Excuse me, apparently my voice doesn't even want to talk about this movie anymore. It's like, I don't want to talk about it. Stop talking about these Dorm Daze movies. So, Rusty has an online relationship with this girl who looks hot, but then you find out that she's got a humpback and she's a freak. And of course, that doesn't bode well for Rusty. But all the while, Rusty and his pals, they have to deal with a mad scientist and a vampire, which is a spitting image of Rusty. This vampire's named Radu. So I guess there's two Radus now. There's Radu from subspecies and Radu in Transylmania. So Radu looks exactly like Rusty, and so there's moments throughout the film where there's like misunderstandings, where Radu's vampire uh, crew mistakes Rusty for being Radu, and it was kind of funny. Once again, this script is at its best when it's dealing with the misunderstandings between the different cast members, and it's dealing with that kind of comedy, or just comedy that's just a little bit out of left field. You know, simple stuff like, in order for them to get into the secret mad scientist lab, the stoner guy just randomly starts playing on these skulls and then the door opens. Like, stuff like that is where this script is at its best. Where it's at its worst is really lazy comedy, like fart jokes and really lame attempts at trying to be funny in terms of the drug usage. And oh, this guy, he has a problem with differentiating hot guys versus hot girls, and so he keeps confusing the two. And I'm like, that's why is that funny? This guy, oh look at that girl, but that's a dude. Like ha 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 ha. Like that's not funny. That's just lame. And so there's that whole character, and his name is Mike too, which kind of makes it even worse. I'm like, oh great, there's a guy named Mike, and he's like the most unfunny and lame character in the entire movie. Great. There's a vampire huntress character too, who is trying to hunt vampires. You think that that would lead to something fun and cool, but it really doesn't. So, yeah, the problem with the script is that there's too much shit going on. So there's stuff involving Rusty and his girlfriend, whose father is the dean of the college, who is a mad scientist, and he's been kidnapping people for his experiments. And one of them happened to be this girl that was dating Pete, and this girl has a sister. And it's played by the Garza twins. The characters are Leah and Danny. And so Leah, I believe that's who I think that's so yeah, it's Leah. Yeah, one of the two wound up yeah, he's kidnapping girls from the university for experiments to remove their heads for a body swap to give Draguta, his daughter with the humpback, a new body. So one of these girls that was taken for this experiment happens to be the sister of this girl that Pete is dating. And so there's some stuff that happens with the two sisters and some drama that's involved between the two later on in the movie. I have to admit it was kind of fun when this girl was just ahead and they had to deal with her and trying to hide her and all the shenanigans ensued involving this headless girl. The whole stuff in the mad scientist lab is honestly some of the better elements in this script. The Radu stuff is okay as well, but even then, it's not that great. The best parts of it are when Rusty is being mistaken for Radu and he has to think on his feet when he's surrounded by vampires. And there's a lot of typical sort of stuff that happens in this that's just very the norm for a dumb stoner or dumb raunchy comedy. And it just leads to a lot of comedy that falls very flat. And like I said, the plot is just all over the place. These characters, they go to Transylvania, they go to this college. One gets kidnapped and gets their head taken and is now just a head. They have the stuff with Radu. You have this other girl who all of a sudden now, this character, Lynn, is Newmar's girlfriend. I don't know why, but now she's Newmar's girlfriend, and she is getting randomly possessed off and on by this music box that has the spirit of this sorceress who was in love with Radu, and then this vampire hunter trapped her in her soul in this box. So there's a lot of moments where she will get possessed by this spirit and act all weird, and then she'll snap out of it and then just be like, "Ew, what was I doing? Why was I kissing you, Rusty? You're gross." Like a lot of that is just not something that really clicks that well, but there are some moments involving the script with those particular elements is kind of funny. Just how dumb it is when the girl who is very much just a total airhead and a ditz, she's just like, "Oh my god, I'm being abducted by aliens." Like she doesn't think that she's being possessed by some kind of spirit from the music box. She just thinks that she's being abducted by aliens, and so she runs with that for the rest of the movie, which is admittedly kind of funny. It's one of those like moments where like, yeah, it's dumb, but it's kind of funny. And you get like the ending where the vampire Radu gets accidentally shot and killed by Cliff. And then Cliff just starts writing these books that are full of crap about him being this great vampire hunter. And then it just starts a series of like the vignettes that end the movie where we have all these different characters and what they're doing next. The vampire huntress, she's a cop now and she has her own show and she's trying to go after this guy she thinks is a werewolf, but it's just a hairy hillbilly in a trailer. Um, the girl with who's just ahead, she goes on with Brady and they become this massively successful magic act that even makes Fried and Roy jealous. You have this whole thing where Dragusa, she's got a new body somehow, even though her father was essentially, I think he was arrested or something by the end of the movie or wasn't a part of the picture anymore. But somehow she gets a new body and she has a baby with Rusty, and the baby has a hunchback. Uh, there's a whole thing with I don't even know if there was anything involving Newmar and Lynn. if I remember correctly, like, in the end. Like, I don't think there was yeah, Dean was the Dean was arrested for his crime, so he's arrested, but somehow she still got a new body. Some go on to have great careers, others don't. Uh, the stoner guy, uh, Wang, he goes on to become a plastic surgeon in Transylvania, Romania, and he gets his own reality show and he screws up and winds up giving this girl like one giant breast. That's the kind of comedy that you're getting in this script, just randomness for a good chunk of it, just random nonsense. And it's just dumb. At times, it's kind of funny because of just how dumb it can be, but other times, it's just straight up dumb and not funny at all. Like stuff involving the citizens of Transylvania who want pants. Like that's what they're wanting the most, not currency, not anything else. Like you give them blue jeans and you'll get motorcycles in return, and you'll start a business selling blue jeans, and then you'll become a mass millionaire. Like doesn't I don't really understand that particular joke or whatever they were trying to do with that. But then again, this is the same script that has a scene where there's a bunch of horses farting, so who knows? So yeah, not really what I would consider a clever script. And the cast, I mean, for what they're asked to do, it's okay. Patrick Cavanaugh, Tony Denman, playing Pete Newmar, Paul H. Kim is back as Wang, Jennifer Lyons is Lynn again, Oren Skoog as Rusty, David Steinberg as Dean Floca, who, by the way, it was fun to see him again because he was Willow's friend in Willow. So I was like, oh, it's Willow's friend from Willow. But his performance, I said it was fine, but he was definitely hamming it up, and at times it was a bit cringe. Lucetta Vander plays the vampire huntress, Theodore Van Sloan. She's hot, she's sexy, but she can't act. Keep in mind, this is the same actress who played Sindel in Mortal Kombat Annihilation. So she's acting is definitely not her strong suit. The Garza twins, they were fine as Leah and Danny. Also didn't mind Irina A. Hoffman as Draguta or Dragusa or however I thought it was Dragusa. James DeBello's barely in it, but he's still kind of fun as Cliff. Patrick Casey as Mike sucked. It was lame as hell. Warren Miller was just kind of there as Brady. So the cast doesn't really have as many newcomers to it that kind of add anything that really elevates it, like Larry Drake, for instance, in Dorm Daze 2. So instead, you get like the girl who played Sindel and delivered one of the worst lines in film history. No, you must die. Like she's she's in this. Great. So the cast, not really anything that amazing or that great. And it's like 92 minutes, but like there are points where it drags a little bit because you're just not really getting that invested in the plot and it's not really that funny. And for whatever reason, this got a theatrical release, had like over 1,000 theaters, and it made only like $400,000, and it set like a record for like one of the largest bombs to have ever been released in that many theaters. This effectively killed the career of David and Scott Hillenbrand. Like they didn't really do anything for the most part after this. But in all honesty, I've seen worse comedies, worse dumb comedies, but I've also seen a lot better. This is still, like I said, lame. The epitome of lame and pretty forgettable. And apparently there were a bunch of movie investors who wound up suing the people behind this movie because of just how big of a bomb it wound up being and how much money they lost. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on the Dorm Daze trilogy. It's not really, in my opinion, a trilogy of films that is that tremendous or that entertaining, but there is some dumb fun to be had at times, and I've seen, worse movies than these 3. Like, there are films that have come out fairly recently in theaters that, in my opinion, are worse. Like, I would rather watch all 3 of these again than Madam Web, for instance. But anyway, that's my thoughts on the Dorm Daze trilogy, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.